don't.
What do you do with this technology?
Yeah, no, I would dive headfirst into what's making you uncomfortable. So I think there's a big opportunity here, and it's going to be persistent for a little while, to go deep, make yourself an expert in how you can solve your own problems or create cool things or do things with these tools that are emerging that have never existed before. Because I felt, we had buddies and people who did amazingly well Web 1 and Web 2, and you think, shit, that was a really good idea. I had some ideas similar to that, or maybe we could have got involved or worked with those guys or built something really cool at that time, because they really did great things, and it felt like you missed the boat.
Welcome to the Mikey G podcast experience. Yes, we are back. It's been like a week and a half now, but JT, welcome to the Mikey G podcast experience. How you doing, my man?
Mikey, I'm doing great. It's great to be here with you.
Thank you so much. What you don't know is there's been a lot of hype been built up in the background here, because Bubble, my main man, Asaf, he reached out and he was like, dude, I met this guy at a dinner party or wherever you guys were. And he was like, he is going to be such a great podcast. I just feel it. And now we're here. But that was like a month ago, because we're all so busy, but we're here and I cannot wait for the conversation. First off, though, we always do the nice formal little introduction, which is, he has been, how long have you been working on the executive search field, JT?
Yeah, we founded the company back in 2001. So it's at 25 years.
25 years.
Yeah.
That's what they call mastery, people. So he's at the mastery level of executive search. He's also been helping to build early stage startups and invest in early stage startups. But here is the most important part that you need to remember about JT. This dude loves a good arm wrestling match. And apparently it's pretty good at it too. And you want to shed some light on that one, because that's a new one for me, man.
It's just one of those things, when you grow up skinny, you really latch on to anything you can to impress yourself on people, maybe trying too hard, coming from small town. But it's something, funnily enough, I used to be, when I say been doing executive search for 25 years, sometime before that I was skinny and small. So it was like, I found I was reasonably good at arm wrestling and didn't look like I was. So that was a lot of fun. It is still a bit of fun. It usually involves too many beers, though, to be honest.
Yes. I've actually been in those situations. The problem is if you have too many beers, sometimes you get, your ego gets a little hold of you. Yeah. And you could rip an arm socket out. You could get a little crazy with arm wrestling if you make bad decisions.
Especially when you're getting older, you just find you're not that guy anymore.
You wake up, have too many beers. You wake up in the hospital and ask yourself what happened. You're like, God damn, that arm wrestling thing.
Eventually, that's where the story ends, mate. That's where the story will end.
Dude, I had to Google. I was Googling it while we were talking. Over the Top. It's a fantastic movie. The Sylvester Stallone arm wrestling movie. He's a trucker. He's just a professional arm wrestler. It's such a bizarre movie, but it's so good. Thank you for reminding me of that. So with that being said, we're here, people. The world famous Mikey G podcast experience question. JT, how did you get to the seat you're sitting in today? To reiterate for the audiences listening for the first time, or will listen to the podcast in the future, Chapter 1 is your childhood. This is a massive part of everybody's life. And so what fundamental kind of mantras your parents or parental figures gave you? Be kind, work hard, pay it forward. Another prompting question is, where you tinker or did you play sports? Or just a vivid memory, man. Give me 1 to 2 of those and we could talk for days. I already know me and you are both talkers, so we're going to have a lot of beautiful insights. Chapter 2 is your schooling and professional career, this executive search thing. But remember here, always, I'm really framing, obviously we need some chronological order there and some actual meat of the background. But the main part on the rest of this conversation is the insights. Like, people listen to this show to level up, get insights, to try new things. So that you've done the hard work of failing multiple times. What were the big aha moments for you? And then the same going forward on chapter 3, which is your current day. What are you currently working on? You have a little startup of your own. And then what do the next 3 to 6 months look like? And that's it. We will have a beautiful organic conversation. So chapter 1, man, start anywhere in the childhood where you flow, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, look, I'll give you the backstory. It's great. I love sort of, I don't think people do that often enough, is sort of, where did you come from, to get a sense of
course,
why you landed here and how you are the way you are. But interestingly, I'm from a small town. Well, I grew up in Tasmania, born in Hobart, which is the capital city there. But my parents were both teachers. My father was a principal, and my mother was a teacher, and they have been teachers for many decades and are semi-retired now. Both of them still work in different ways. But we traveled around many places. I went to many different schools, and I think part of that was, you land in a new place, you need to make friends quickly. You establish yourself. You sort of, you became. I think I became reasonably adaptable at, telling my own story and in trying to sort of become friends with as many people as quickly as you could when you land in a new school or a new town. And my parents are really community minded, quite musical people, quite, engaged with community things other than just teaching and education. They're also doing community projects and getting involved in building different organizations. My mother particularly has always been involved in community initiatives around employment, education, connecting the dots between sort of business and kids and creative arts and industry and those types of things. So, having moved around a lot as a kid, we traveled overseas. My father studied in London for a while. That's a vivid memory, living in London for 6 months when I was sort of 10, in Friends International House, which is like Quaker House in London. And it's all sorts of interesting people from all over the world, from Africa. I had a best buddy, who was from Zimbabwe, and we just played table tennis every day, all day. I don't think I did much school that year. I was supposed to be remote schooling. I'm pretty sure it was just
table tennis.
mainly, it was discovering, McDonald's for the first time in London, like having never, it wasn't in Tasmania, and playing table tennis and those things. But we had a really fascinating people from all sorts of generations studying at University of London, near where we were staying.
So you already said, you said enough for us to talk forever, believe it or not. The first thing that you said that I think is really fascinating is, it seems like you've gone down this route of dedicating a lot of your life to connection, and your parents were deep in community. And that is all about connection and understanding people in your local area. Now, obviously, when you're that age, you're not thinking about how this is impacting me, but reflecting back on that, do you think that had an impact as the way that they were spending this extra time to, it sounds like, bring community together? Any thoughts there?
Yeah, community one aspect, but probably just more the movement, right? So just getting comfortable in your surroundings and understanding what's important to get connected and to work with other people, to find your space wherever you may land, and whether that's traveling and living overseas, or whether that's moving to a new town and a new school, a new job. I think just naturally, as a result of that, I was always comfortable, and I'm still very comfortable just landing anywhere and figuring a place out and figuring people out and figuring out where you can sort of lean in or enjoy that community and help that community.
So this is always interesting to me, because I think I know what I would say to this, but because you've done this so much over your lifetime, I'm sure it becomes natural to you. But for somebody that struggles to do this, what do you think about when you land in that new place? Like, what are the things to help people start creating these connections? Because I think me and you couldn't agree more that one of the things that is happening right now, this is going to be a very big issue, is exactly this: landing in a new place, making connections, especially like that's what humans do: tell stories, build connections. What do you think about when you're at zero and you're in a new place? You need to do that.
For me, it's always what connections, if not first degree, secondary connections, do I have in a place, and then sort of trying to figure out what your starting point is. And being from a small state at the arse end of Australia, you sort of with, there's only 500,000 people live in that state, but I'm sure many more people have migrated out. Many come back over time to have families or bring their families or get closer to family again. But I think part of that experience is that you reach out and you try and you have to sort of figure things out and figure out pathways and find your opportunities. So really quickly going to a new place, and it used to be when we were traveling as after university, it would be find the bar in town that looks like the most fun and just talk to everyone, right? And when we land in North America, over tip, look after the staff, ask them what advice, about what you need to know about this town or this place and who's interesting and who we should meet. But the overlay of that with your personal network. So now that we have things, I guess ways of staying connected more easily, it's quite easy to find who else, is in my industry that I've worked with before, or friends of friends is in this town that I'm moving to, whether that be Singapore or Barcelona or London. Who's passionate about similar things of those people, and what are the sort of trends in this market, or what are the people sort of talking about in this market, and how can I contribute to that and find ways to pay it forward or help people, whether that's leveraging my network and experience to sort of parlay something forward. And to me, Faden, who's my old business partner originally in Mitchell Lake, is like, how do we pay it forward consistently using our networks to do things outside of the things we were commercially charging money for? How do we take those same relationships and help people succeed by introducing to each other,
Dude, it's beautiful insight. See, look, dude, we're like about 11 minutes in and you've already dropped enough knowledge. I could leave right now. Somebody would benefit from just
don't leave yet, mate. We just started.
Tiny little nuggets that you've dropped. So here's the question. I like to take concepts and just give tangible things too. You hear this term "pay it forward" a bajillion times, and from someone that has done that a lot, what are the forms that pay it forward come? Because I feel like most humans hear the word "pay it forward" and they think of some monetary transaction, and I think people like me and you who've kind of unlocked the meaning of "pay it forward," it couldn't be more opposite than that, right? So what does pay it forward mean to you?
Much more karmic for me, but I think for me it's where you have the opportunity to contribute something to someone without any expectation of something coming back, and it's sort of it's great when it does, and you find that if you Faye and I and the team and many people who've worked with us over the years, we do a thing for money, which is we do research and headhunting and executive search. And we help build leadership teams and help companies establish in new footprints and new places and all those types of things, and grow. But what we also find is once you've worked with enough people over time, the first thing you begin to realize is, wow, do you know this other person who's doing something adjacent to what you're doing? Because it's really interesting. Because we get to see this broad section of the industry, from founders and investors and operators and partners and advisors and suppliers of all kinds. And many of them, because we work across it so much, will realize they should be in the same room at some point, or they need to know each other. And sometimes that's just, oh, wow, you guys get on well. And sometimes it's like, we just help build a team for someone and they're like, oh, we really need a customer in this category. Do you know someone in that business? And it's like, yeah, we can introduce you to a friend or a client who might, be interested in kicking the tires on your platform. And that's good for us because, maybe you'll get bigger, or, they'll become your first big customer. And that's good for us because we'll work with you more down the track. Or maybe it's, we know someone who's interested in investing in your category. They'll give you a hearing or give you some feedback on your pitch, or, maybe they know someone else who's useful to you. So it's not always the first person you introduce, but maybe what that unlocks in terms of their networks. But it all starts with sort of, just thinking beyond yourself for a minute, and beyond the sort of thing that you're working on, thinking, what's the adjacent thing, the thing we haven't discussed? Or a lot of people have side hustles or things they're passionate about that you don't become aware of. Because when you sort of get together for a business conversation, quite often it's got a context around it, which might be, we'd love you to speak to this company that we think you'd be awesome for. But then you go on to a greater conversation and figure out there are many other things that you might have in common, or that someone else might have in common with them.
Yeah. So that actually brings up another interesting point is, do you find yourself has evolved over time, these intro calls that we've had, that you do, that I do all the time, do you find those always starting off with more business or more person? What do those look like to you when people are thinking about how these exchanges go? Or is it just a hodgepodge of both?
I think it depends on who you're talking to and the context of the conversation. Some people are time poor, and but I think the better conversations and the ones that are more productive typically start in a more human way, which is getting to a level of understanding and a cadence of flow and communication and conversation that is engaging. So you find some common points, and often, almost invariably, it's a bit like I was saying with getting to a new place, a new job, a new place, a new school, whatever it might be, opening up and finding some common ground. And I think when I'm having a conversation with a potential client or a senior executive or an expert in something, you want to build some engagement and establish some trust and establish some common understanding. That could be totally unrelated to work. It might be, oh, wow, we know these people in common. That's really cool. I notice you're a fan of that sports team, so I can see the sort of thing behind you, or whatever it might be.
Sports
and
is
it's
a big one.
Sports is a big one. And music, sports, like, travel, places, food is a huge one. And it's,
that's another big one too.
It's like,
So here's the question, and kind of going back into the child. So we heard travel, and kind of travel forces you to put yourself in these situations to meet new people. But if you think back to, I always love this kind of thought or question, which is, you've built a career on based on paying it forward and understanding the power of connection. Where did that start for you? Was this something you like inherently loved to do? Were you an introvert? Did your parents teach you any insights? Like, looking back, I'm interested in, like, where did that love for connection or understanding of how important it was start?
Yeah, I think I've always sort of fallen in my career, like, in a direction. I haven't forced a direction so much as opportunities have arisen, and I've been always willing to sort of take chances. I mean, that said, for the last 25 years, we've been in more or less in one business, although I'm tangentially involved in a few others from an investment or advice or collaboration or partnership point of view. And now startups myself. But I think, when you start, you haven't got a huge amount of experience. So I traveled the world. I worked in hospitality. After university, I came back to Australia, worked in Melbourne. A friend kindly got me a job in technology in a law firm, admin, technology, litigation support services. And then another friend it pulled me out of that into it was a group of friends, actually. Some were recruiters and some were working at the company. But they were good and old friends, but they thought I'd be good at selling legal technology to lawyers, which I wasn't fantastic at. It was a difficult job, but it really taught me a lot about that industry and technology. It was really the early days of internet technologies being applied to litigation. So, digital court books and physical documents turning into digital documents and search and research and those processing.
Hold on real quick, because we're going way further on. I'm really interested going back to this childhood of, like, all right, let's reframe the question in a little bit in a different way, maybe. What were you passionate about? Like, looking back, what excited you? Like, who was JT as a kid?
As a kid, I love sports. Yeah, look, I love being involved in, and I wasn't ever focused enough or good enough at one thing in particular, but I loved all. So I played lots of different sports, and that's all we did. In a small towns in the northwest of Tasmania, there wasn't an abundance of cultural, history layer on layer that you have perhaps somewhere like Europe. But people are super competitive and active, and you've got beautiful outdoors and landscapes, and you have these dots of little towns all up and down the northwest coast of Tasmania. There is intense basketball scene, cricket, football, like tennis, and it produces some really, basketball. Bizarrely enough, on the northwest coast of Tasmania, we had, like, this little school I went to, high school. There's probably 800 kids in 4 grades, but for some reason, we produce a lot of good basketballers. So there's every lunchtime, any minute anyone got, you play basketball. But the little towns were allowed to have 2 American imports as basketballers. So you get sometimes ex NBA players, but mostly ex college players, or who couldn't quite make it to the
Right.
serious pros in the US, would come to Australia and they'd play in maybe the NBL, which is a good league, one of the better leagues outside of the US as a professional league. And if they weren't good enough to play NBL, or sometimes even if they were, they'd maybe do some sort of local midweek stuff for training or whatever. But there's a seconded league called the Continental Basketball Association. And what the local teams would do is they'd have people play in the CBA, and they'd also play for your local town team.
Mm-hmm.
And you're allowed to have 2 imports. And they were serious dudes. Like, they were really good, much better than we were. But it led to this really competitive, like, all these little towns of between sort of 15 and 25,000 people all linked together. You get like 500 people to an inter-town game on a Wednesday night.
Wow. So you created a little farm system then. It was almost like a little farm system.
Yeah, well, it was just, and what that led to is, like, some of the guys I went to school with, played in the NBL, like in Australia, and, went on, and it was just a really popular thing at our school. But it was just more a product of how competitive the little towns were. And it was really entertaining. Like, because when you know the personalities or your friends playing or whatever, like, sport takes on a whole other sort of engagement level and interest for you. Yeah.
You know, what's interesting to me, though, is that is already the form of already the insight of connection and community. And, you're pitting towns against each other through sport, right? And then we already just said that sport is one of the main ways that you can connect with a human very quickly. Obviously, there's a lot of people that don't like sports, but it's all starting to make sense to me. One question that I'm interested in is thinking back into, so obviously like sports, but more kind of on were you creative? Did you like to read books? Were you a science, math person? Like, what did that start looking like? What did you start percolating and formulating your interest as you're starting to grow up?
Well, I was a reader. Yeah. So stories, and funny, my daughter is now 2. Started reading really early, and I always loved stories. My mother was a reading teacher. My father was a principal. So I was around books and libraries a lot as a little kid. Being dragged around, when they had to go back to school late or stay late, it's like I'd go and hide in the library or whatever. So I got into really, big stories and series, and whether it was C.S. Lewis or, and then when things got boring, like at home, if the weather was bad in Tassie, you just sort of start scanning the books, and then maybe because you're limited, you haven't got the library in front of you, but you've got your parents' book selection, so you've got Ludlam and Wilbur Smith and Alistair MacLean and all those things. Probably read them when I was way too young, but it was like, that was fun, and so you get a really expansive sort of opportunity to escape into these worlds and learn. So I was really good at reading, and I loved stories, and I loved, escapism in that sense. I was never particularly fantastic at maths and science, beyond the basics, or not something I could get my head to stay tuned into for very long. But I really enjoy content. I like creativity. I like music. Like, my family were, my father played and mother both played instruments and performed at different ways, or helped kids. Like, my mother was a music teacher for a little while too. So that was lots of fun. So, music, reading, outside of sports and things, there were other ways to connect or even disconnect, at that time.
Yeah. Talk to me a little bit about creativity. I love this, my favorite topic, and we usually talk about this a lot. I'm growing up. Like, how did starting that early, like, how did creativity start manifesting for you? And then what is I'd love to just your take on how you define it for yourself. Like, what does creativity ultimately mean to you? But I'm interested in the thinking and reflecting back, like percolating how that started manifesting.
Yeah, creativity for me. Well, I always enjoyed art. I was never particularly amazing. Again, I think sometimes to get really good at something, you need to do your hours. I'm going to quote Malcolm Gladwell, but it's sort of like you sort of, the more time you do something intently and with focus, I think the better you get at it. I just enjoy doing like all sorts of creative things. I've always enjoyed, art at school and art in different ways, without being fantastic at it. And writing I really enjoy. I've always found writing is something I love to do, and took a creative approach to that even in business. I've always enjoyed writing for fun, for business, whether that's blogs or research papers and those types of things.
Yeah.
Having a
Yeah.
turn of phrase is something I enjoy,
Yeah.
and always have.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of that, is just what you absorb as being, fun storytelling or compelling things that you've read or experienced. And in terms of creativity itself, I think it's just being able to find a new spin or a new angle, a new vision, or interpret something, like finding a way to make 1+1 = 3, right? Like what's additive to doing things differently. And then that's not just creative output as in the arts. It's like, what's a creative way to look at a situation? Like we are stuck in at this dead end. How do we bridge out of it? What's our next step? Without doing something that's obvious, without, backtracking or breaking everything that we've already done. How do we find the next phase of it? So I think being creative and lateral in the way you think about things has always appealed to me as well. Like I get really bored by repetition. Like I think there's value in repetition and expertise and developing muscle memory. But I think there's, what I personally enjoy and what I thrive on is like, let's do something different. Let's break it. Let's try it from a different angle.
Yeah, dude, it's beautiful. All amazing, beautiful insight. Like this is going off a little bit of the tangent of the chronological, but I think it's appropriate. Is you've had such experience in different types of founders and companies and building your own company. What are some of the common ways that you see creativity manifesting in business, right? And just because you have to be super creative there in the beginning of a startup. Um, what does that look like?
I think you need to be somewhat creative in any business. And when we started our business, it's like, how are you different? Like if you're starting a business, in an early part of your career, you haven't got a huge back catalog to sell your audience on. So it's really, what are you doing differently to, be interesting to the market, to your customers? Why would they want to work with you? And they're the first questions they ask. After 20 years of doing something, you've got a huge back catalog of experiences, and that bit gets easier. But you still got to differentiate, because it's like, well, you don't want to be known as OG and great, but doing nothing new is not where you want to be.
Exactly.
So it's being a little bit maverick all the time. I think is important. So being creative when you start is like, well, how are you going to position your story? Like, what story are you going to create that's compelling, that is analogous to what you can actually deliver? So you can't just go out and speak a whole bunch of bullshit. You've got to be able to deliver the story that you're narrating or you're crafting, and it's got to be legitimate. But giving it an endpoint, like a direction or a vision, or this is where we're going. This is the journey we're on. We're going a slightly different direction to the market, because we think there's value to be had for our customers and our teams, our people, by pursuing this direction. At the time when we started, at the outset of Mitchell Lake, it was the tech wreck, right? So we just had a year or two's exposure to the internet, taking off, catching fire. We're seeing sort of the growth in Australia of local ventures, but a lot of brands coming from offshore with technology. The Yahoos and eBays and Amazons and those types of companies, and then local adoption of technology for different things. And it was hugely exciting. And then all of a sudden it just collapsed. And it was like, at the time, it was like, what's our narrative? Well, we think this internet thing is going to continue to be, interesting and valuable. How's it going to iterate? And so we found our way into just focusing, just really dialing in on what's internet and venture going to look like in 2001. What are the next 5 years and 10 years going to look like? We think it's this same talent who've been, giving energy to this sort of change in the market, leveraging these technologies and bringing things online. Let's stay close to that. Let's go deeper into that. Let's work with those companies only. So we just stayed really narrow in that. And that was our angle.
So take me back now. I mean, we get kind of like, high school, you're starting to think you go to college. Like, take me through those times a little bit. What's on your mind? What are you getting into? And you're really starting to formulate a little bit of something of like I want to try X or Y? What does that look like?
Yeah. Well, we in Tasmania at the time, when you finished high school, if you're in a public school, you then went to a separate school for the 2 years prior to university. And I
Oh,
didn't really
okay.
know whether I was going to university, but I went to this grade 11 and 12 Helly College, which was a state, college for grade 11 and 12, where you basically you study to qualify to get into university and to finish that certificate. I met some amazing, like really awesome people there who I'm still friends with today. And some of them were much more academically minded than I was. I didn't come from a particularly academic school or background. So it was being close to them and developing those friendships and maybe them having the vision of some of them were, going to the mainland university, some were going to the University of Tasmania. And we got into those networks and met generations of people who'd been before through those friends. And I thought, this sounds like fun. Like, I'm going to go to residential college in Hobart. I had family and older friends. I was originally born in Hobart. My family originally from Hobart, which is the capital city in the south of Tasmania. Still only, 220,000 people in that city, but beautiful, very beautiful place, like backdrop by a mountain on a harbour. Tasmania is a very beautiful place. And
Yes, looks
it was
amazing.
like, yeah, it's really pretty. And it's sort of, it was just that becoming friends with that sort of cohort who were naturally going to university. I wanted to be with them and I hadn't thought deeply about what I might study or if I could even qualify to get into university, but I did. So that was a happy outcome. At least I could hang with them for a little bit longer.
Yeah.
And then when I got there, I was a terrible student, but great at being social. So, I got section 13 from a bunch of classes in first and second year, which means you had to, actually that was more second and third year, but not going to enough tutorials to be allowed to pass. So you'd have to do makeup exams or makeup, classes and other things. So I was always forever being late and, doing other things socially rather than the things I should have been doing to study. But got out of there with a degree. And then it's a very Australian thing when you finish university, and particularly in Tasmania, you do a gap year or a gap couple of years, and go and seek your fortune wherever you can, doing whatever you can. And for me, that was going initially with a group of friends to London and then around Europe, and then later doing another couple of years going to Canada, a little bit of time in the States, and then it was a lot of
Talk to
fun.
me about that quick. How important, that's one thing I always wish I would have done. I went straight to work right out of college. How important is that gap year?
Oh man. So it was 3 years all up, but it was in two different sets. But the first year was a genuine gap year. So you finish university, went with some real characters, to London, and we did it's a very well trodden path. You go to sort of, Earl's Court, then you do this sort of loop around the Mediterranean. You end up at Oktoberfest and maybe the Fringe Festival in Scotland. And we'd always work in hospitality or construction and doing the shittiest jobs because at that point you don't have any real professional skills. I certainly didn't. And it was a lot of fun. But I think that first year, I tell this story a lot to other, like people with kids and I reflect on this with friends. That year was so important especially when you come from a small town or a community where you're very well known to each other. So it's not a big place. Everyone knows you. That's really good. And it's really bad at the same time, right? Like, it's sort of like, if you're having a good time, that's great. If you're not, it's maybe not so great. Maybe you got a perception of yourself, but your perception is effectively just the reflections of your community, the community around you. So you get to get a sense of yourself, and that's people, you start to think, oh, this is who I am. When you break out of that completely and go to the other end of the earth and start working in a pub or a travel agent or in a construction team, you start from scratch. And what you reflect on is you can actually be a completely different person, or they may actually think you're quite different to the way you perceive yourself in a good way.
Yeah.
And you can sort of go, oh, all of a sudden the things that are perhaps constraining you on what people around you are allowing you to be, or wanting you to be, and trying to please them or trying to fill a role or play a role that you've been, you've just evolved into with that network of people. And it's like whether it's a pecking order or anything else. But when you break out of that completely, you start from scratch. And those reflections of new communities, you realize that perhaps you can build a confidence that you didn't have before in something you weren't allowed to be previously.
Yeah. No, that's a beautiful insight. What were some of those for you then? If you're looking back, what do you think fundamentally changed there for you?
I think it was just general confidence. So,
Mm,
going away and testing yourself a little bit, like landing somewhere, having to find jobs, running out of money, having to make money, but building a confidence that you can do that, and that you're independent, and that you don't need necessarily as much of the appreciation or adoration of others to survive and be enjoy your life. And then going back, and then it was interesting, and the reason I sort of bring that up is when you do land back after a year or 2 years away, it's like people approach you with the same, shtick about previously, about how they might know you. And it's like, oh yeah,
yeah.
no, not so much.
Yeah. That's not
I'm not
me
sure that is,
anymore.
it's not me. No. And it's like a lot of it is because personality, is your personality, and a lot of it's grounded in truth, but you don't have to accept what other people think of you as being you. And I think that
Exactly.
for me is you establish your own life, and especially during, I'm just talking about formative years, really. Like I left when I was, 20, 22, and you come back a year later, and then you go away 18 months later and come back 2 years later. It's sort of, you just evolve a lot more context, and a lot more, you broaden your horizons. You're less narrow into the path that you might have known for the first part of your life.
Just such a definitely jealous of that because I always thought about how important that is. I mean, I've done it in different ways, but yeah, I love that advice and I love that insight. So you get back. Why do you come back though? Why don't you just keep on going? Because you're finding yourself. You're figuring it all out. What
Well,
happened there?
you run out of money. But no, look, I think also it's family, friends. You miss home. You miss the things that you've been close to, and the things that sort
Mhm.
of made you who you are. And you want to get back and connect with all of that, especially at that age. And maybe start to, I didn't leave. I left with an arts degree in politics and things, and it wasn't a particularly vocational degree. So it's like you go home first, you establish, save some money, but then I left. Then it's like you go away again. I came back. I went to Melbourne. Started doing more 9 to 5 work in the law firm, and then the technology company, Discovery, with some really great people. And then Fade, my business partner, was working at this business in Sydney just before the Olympics. He's working with this great, the first sort of online internet-focused recruitment firm in Australia, who'd blown up. They've become very successful. They wrote it up and wrote it down, to boom and bust. I sort of always drop this line. There was sort of, in content, things like we were inspired by the boom and forged in the bust that followed. And it's sort of like, it hardens you. You realize what can go wrong. Now I feel like that happens every other year. So it's, it's sort of like we've gone from, a black swan whenever, what are they supposed to turn up every 7 to 10 years? It feels like it's every 2 at the moment.
I mean, it's happening right now. It's just,
Yeah.
it's ridiculous, man. Oh, it's just so beautiful. We're kind of getting into chapter 2 now. Any other thoughts about that chapter 1 and insight? I think you did a beautiful job kind of recounting everything that happened. I've already getting this sense of curiosity that the gap year thing was fantastic, but that this is the question before, and then we'll go into chapter 2 that comes to mind is what's interesting to me is we've had a lot of conversations so far about being independent, trying to find new things. But then at the end, like, yes, the practical part is you ran out of money, you wanted to come home. But you immediately then went into how important family is and wanting to be home and that connection. So there's always this kind of tug and pull. And I think part of me has gone through that as well. What is your thought about independence versus the importance of surrounding yourself with friends and family? This is a constant thing I think people struggle with.
It's a massive challenge for us because we're my wife is from Western Australia, from Fremantle, and she comes from a big Italian family. We've got a daughter. My family are spread all over Australia, but significantly in Tasmania. My father's in Queensland, my brother's in Canberra, So we're spread around a bit. And it's hard. We're a long way away in Spain now. We were in Singapore for 8 years, and that's not a long flight, not a crazy flight for us to get home, and you could be there same day if you needed to be. So we're much more conscious of it now. This last sort of two and a bit years, we do try and get back for a big trip to connect with family and friends as often as we can. But that's now probably only every other year. It used to be a couple of times a year. So that's something that's much more top of mind at the moment. As I said, you're right. I was being facetious when I said, I ran out of money, but I think the reality is you do want to get home and share your stories and find out what's going on at home and find out what other people's stories are as well. And their lives are moving on and getting exciting. And you sort of, it's my greatest joy is to have sort of, long lunches with great friends in Melbourne, Tasmania or Sydney or Perth, when you get to see them and to share those stories and to catch up. And I think being a migratory sort of family, growing up, you sort of build these sort of networks and the value of those relationships quickly. And I think, I've probably been a bit of a butterfly in my life, living in different places, different jobs, traveling a lot, working a lot for travel, traveling a lot for work. And I enjoy that. But then you think, I've really missed some important moments back in those networks. But those networks, thankfully, one of the upsides of the technology, which has many downsides of networking, is that you can stay in touch and dialed into those relationships more than historically. But I think coming from a small place, a small town in a small place, and then a big town in a remote place to the rest of the world and bouncing around different islands and countries, is that you do value much more that connection of networks and helping each other out. And I think Australians and Tasmanians particularly do that for each other because you come from these smaller communities. It's a big competitive, world that's not always forgiving. And when you land in a new place, having some sort of sense of connection or home or someone who you can share a story about football, Australian football or cricket or rugby, is fun. And that's, and you help each other. Like if, actually the end of last year was the first time someone in my generation, their kids came through Europe. And it's like, can they come and crash for a night or two? And, can you give them some vegetables and let them shower before they go to closing weekend in Ibiza? I'm like, yeah, of course. It was so cool because we were doing that a generation ago. Right. And I remember a generation ago, the goodwill and kindness of our parents' generation. Sometimes it'd be people in different countries or cities or even at home who would look out for you where they could. And, that was always a really important thing and something I vividly remember, the kindness of parents of friends of mine, who I'm still close to today, who are just wonderful people to us when we didn't really deserve it. We're just rat bags, getting around the place, but they would always look out for you and, buy you a meal here and there or give you good advice or more than that sometimes.
Yeah. I just had this thought. I love your response to this is like, it maybe probably one of the most special things about this family is, to your point, you said, you've got generations of like young kids now coming through your house. And it's just it's the concept that I think we're all always looking for, which is just straight up unconditional love, no matter what.
Just trust. Yeah. I mean, I love the parents of those kids. I've really only, last time I saw those kids, they were little, toddlers, right? But there's an inherent trust. There is a love for that community and with those relations. They're very close friends, the parents of those kids who came through. But you see those personalities in these kids. Like it's like, wow. Like, it's like you are your mum like 20 years ago, or 30 years ago. It's like, it's crazy. And it's really cool. And it's that, so you feel warm and it gives you a sense of, having support, like when shit goes wrong. And I think this is where networks and family, professionally or otherwise, or personal, that's the sort of value I'd love to instill in my daughter. It's like, there'll always be people who will look out for you, whether you know them now or not. There's this sort of ecosystem of amazing people who've looked after each other for a couple of generations. And, that backup is there for you. And that's a cool thing about coming from a community like, Tasmania, Northwest Coast or Hobart, or East Coast these days, is that, those communities do look out for each other, and you're small enough that you know enough people. In a really big city, I think you maybe get less of that broader secondary community effect, because it is more competitive. You got maybe really tight friends. But you can't know the whole room in the same way you do in a slightly smaller environment.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And I think what's your one other thought, which I think this is just a new thought that dawned on me too, is the reverse of you being independent and maybe not always being around family is, I think there's an inherent benefit there too, which is you can almost kind of come back to the family roots and educate them on like, hey, here's how the world kind of is. Does that sound right? Or do you have any thoughts there?
Well, sometimes you can make yourself useful. Sometimes you probably sound like a dickhead. But it's like, whatever, mate.
Yeah.
Don't buy that shit down here. No, sometimes it's like you can bring back stories or ideas or relationships. Like if someone else is going somewhere you've been, is probably an obvious one, right? Like it's like, oh, you're moving to London or you're moving to New York? I know someone there. You should catch up. Or, it's like, it's weirdly, if I was, in Singapore, I used to walk out the front gate and stand next to the school bus to put out my daughter on the bus, and stand next to this really cool guy who was sort of, grew up in a community in Palo Alto. And for years we'd talk about sort of, tech, and for the last sort of 3 years we were there, like this is 5-6 years ago, it was like Web3 and then eventually AI. And he's a brilliant mind. And, he ends up in Bahrain. He has to leave there. He goes back to San Diego. And then all of a sudden I'm going, mate, you should speak to Mikey. Like seriously, this happens all the time. And we're talking because of your man Asaf at the Miracle, and it's like who are now a client, but it's like connecting all these dots, which like, you'd really get on well with this person, or this person might be good for you, or you could be good for each other. And it's sometimes it's just a feeling, right? It's like these personalities would vibe. Sometimes there's more nuance, that like this person is the yin to that yang. They're an investor, they're a startup.
Of course. Yeah.
They need a job. This person's got a company. They're an expert in this. These guys you could really use that expertise. But it's just conversations and trust over time means that it gives you confidence to more, I guess, connect the dots with more intent and a better hope of a good outcome for both parties.
I think it makes sense that you went that way, because I think actually that's probably the biggest benefit is like now you can come home, and then if you have the friends and family that are going somewhere else, you might be able to make that connection. I mean, the fact that you just went through all those dots, and, I just met Justin over the weekend, who was a beautiful human being, and we talked for 2 hours straight, and we might be doing some podcasting together too, which is cool. Like that's where it came from. My question to you, and this is kind of, I don't know. I'm interested in your response here. Is that the only thing left for humans with a rapid evolution of AI? Is that the truly most important thing?
Shared experience
makes,
Well, I think human experience. I don't think it's something you can synthesize at all with tech. So it is probably it will be one of the hardest things to synthesize in that way. Is still the best word. So yeah, I don't know. It's interesting. Personally, I'm hoping and believe that the technologies we're seeing emerge now empower humanity to do more of the things that are more fun, that are more human, that we're just naturally great at, and do less of the things that involve us staring at screens or doing, work that we're either no good at or don't want to do.
Right. Right.
Which hopefully releases us to spend more time in relationships and storytelling and having fun and sharing experiences and having experiences, which is something I think only humans can appreciate. So it's sort of, that's my thought on that. I don't know how it iterates from here. I'm just hoping that that's how we use it, and not, I think network technologies, we've sort of touched on this before, but the negative impact on humanity and communities is evident, I think, in politics, in anger, and rage farming that we're seeing all too often. And I think I worry. I think all of us who've got children, or know people with children, fear for the psychology, the impact of COVID was a really a tough thing to experience for certain ages of children. Whether they were sort of at the pointy end of school where that became really stressful, or whether they were just younger kids who were isolated. And I think it tipped a lot of kids further into being chronically online, I think is the reference. But it's sort of, just escapism is sometimes healthy, I think, and it's fun. But when it's your only option, and you're in these places where negative thoughts can propagate, or negative impacts of other people or bad actors, none of that is good. So I'm sort of looking for ways to get away from that.
Yeah, I agree. I don't know if you've heard, like, there's a company called Tin Can who's brought back the landline. Like, it's a really big
Nice.
deal for kids. Yeah, dude,
That's
you gotta
cool.
check them out. It's
Yeah.
brilliant. Like, their website is just like somebody in picture of the 80s or 90s just sitting at, you're like, how great
Well,
was that? Just
let's
sitting and talking
let's
to
go
your
back
friend.
let's go back to dumb phones. Like, you be the
Yeah,
smart thing. You be
yeah,
the smart thing. Use
yeah,
a dumb phone.
yeah,
But it's like
yeah.
it's interesting because Australia's been through this legislative, or they've legislated to sort of ban social media access for kids under 16, and that's a fairly recent thing.
I
And
think
I've
that's
heard people
I think
arguing
that's a
both points.
brilliant move.
I think it's a good move. I've heard both sides of the story, and but personally, I think it's a really healthy thing because I just think they're being so obviously exploited by algorithms and third parties, to their detriment, and that's widely known and accepted, I think. Oh, that's neat. Yeah,
Check that, right?
yeah, I'll check
Tin
that out.
Can.
That's so cool. Well, it's. I was listening to someone on one side of the argument, sort of saying, you're going to isolate this sort of generation of kids. They're going to feel isolated or detached, and it's like, what are
Mhm.
you isolating them from? And it's like, how are they going to communicate? And it's like, well, they can use a dumb phone. They can still use a phone, just
Right,
not the social
right,
media. Like, you
right.
still message. You just don't want them exploited, because there's awful stories of the targeting of certain demographics who are suffering anxiety and being deliberately targeted, and that data being sold deliberately to brands who want to take advantage of that time in their life, like teenagers or even preteens who are really, really vulnerable to psychological manipulation, but that being exploited to the benefit of brands seems sort of gross. And
Yeah, and that's the terrifying thing about AI is we've seen the damage that just some social media accounts and pictures and words can do. Now you're
yeah,
talking about a companion that knows your soul. That's a whole nother ball game, man. Don't be naive that the billionaires aren't going to manipulate that for some time a game.
well, it
And
does,
it's already
does seem that having $1 billion isn't enough. So that's
exactly.
it seems to be the commonality, that if the one thing that is true of all of them when they get there is they don't stop. So sort of like, and then the acceleration of their ability to impact more of your life is frightening, because everything is so connected and interconnected. And so whether that's, media, whether that's communications, whether that's banking and finance, whether that's, food and energy now, I think everyone realizes that people can impact that really quickly, and those things can fall apart. I just recently, with all the conflict in the Middle East at the moment, and fuel impacts and oil impacts, Australia, I'm just catching up on news from home. It's like we're just about running out of fuel, gas.
No, man.
Yeah, and
This is
it's
not good.
apparently we only had 49 days of capacity at any given time. That's the reserve capacity, because we used to free flying supply chains, and other countries, like I'm pretty sure the UK have 120, 126 days, Japan have 200, right? It still doesn't sound like huge amounts of reserves, like, but
It's not.
yeah, but it's frightening how quickly things can change.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we're off track now, but
No,
bringing
all
that
good.
back to how kids and communities are now influenced in a way that suits the benefit of smaller and smaller groups of people is a bit frightening.
Correct. And so what is your I mean, since we're here, how do you, and then we'll get more back to it, but like, what are some things that you do or solutions that you try to think about with your kids, right? You're a father.
Mm.
Um,
Oh yeah.
is it just doubling down on the stuff that we've been talking about? What do you think about?
Yeah. I mean, we really conscious of connectivity, and how connected to what our daughter is, and what content we watch together. You can't control everything, and the reality is that although our daughter doesn't have a phone and isn't likely to anytime soon, she does have an iPad, and we gate what she can watch and what she can contact and use on that platform, all those platforms. But you can't control all her friends, and she's going to go and stay with friends, and they have devices, and they're often different family environments, and their rules are their rules. But we just try and the best you can, just encourage your kids, or the way we think about it is just to enable her to think critically about what she's engaging with and why, and how it impacts her and how she feels about it. And that's all just a bunch of bullshit.
Yeah,
People at the
yeah,
end of a they may not even be real people, and often they're not.
yeah,
So you
yeah.
can't, just to be careful and conscious, um, and healthily suspicious of anything that's online.
Healthily suspicious is a good one. Yeah, this topic always comes up every conversation, which is back to balance too, right? Like
Mm.
you obviously want to put them in a bubble and protect them
You
from
don't you
everything.
don't want to do them a disservice by not
Correct.
allowing them to develop their own approach to things. Use all the tools that are out there and available to them, and all the sources of information and all those things. It's just more, you know, making sure there's not one source of information or one opinion, or that they're ingesting, and thinking critically, like, about different
Yeah.
contexts and perspectives, and why something might be really important to one person is not necessarily the same for another.
Yeah, I mean, whether it's tech or whether it's, I always use this analogy of like some of the people, my friends that got hit the hardest when they went to college were the friends that had to be home at 7 p.m. every night and really
Yeah.
strict, you know,
No, lose
fam.
lose lose their minds when
Yeah.
they get
And
out of the
then when
house.
like, it's just this huge mountain of freedom and they don't know what to do with it and they can't handle it, man. And so
Well,
it's the
well,
same.
it's amazing, and then it blows up, right? Like, and I think
Yeah.
it's having, it's like, if you surround a kid who's of a certain age with just a whole bunch of candy, they're going to eat the candy. They don't know when to stop. They'll be sick.
100%.
It's like, give it, if you leave the big bag of food open with a Labrador in the kitchen, don't expect it to be there when you get back. It's just that there's no rationing, there's no, self management. So I think the best thing you can do for yourself and your kids is to encourage, some awareness of where things start and stop, and what a healthy amount of anything looks like. And uh,
Healthy
you can't
amount.
cut everything off. You can't protect your
100%.
child. Yeah, and it just makes it worse. As you said, like, you create a bubble. What happens when the bubble bursts, or when they get outside that bubble? Like, it was part of why we were in Singapore for 8 years, and as beautiful as that experience was for much of it, with the exception of COVID, it's a very small place. It's brilliantly run. It's clean. It's got fantastic infrastructure and health and education, and the people are super, really kind people and thoughtful people, super intelligent, industrious, so connected to Southeast Asia, and positive, and they do amazing things, but it's too safe, too well run, too, and it doesn't, you don't have these sort of fluctuations of
Yes.
ups and downs that you necessarily see in other societies or communities that we've grown up in or been exposed to. So part of it was, we needed more space. Just, we needed the antidote to city living for a while, which is why we moved to Europe. And then the other part was, we didn't want to limit the exposure and experience of our daughter to just that perfect
Yeah.
ecosystem.
What a beautiful segue, because that utopia is actually a bad thing too, because then you just become complacent about and expect that this is the way things are when it really isn't. Another yet huge problem that if we go the right way, which I hope we do, there's so many different things that are, and we're talking 5 years or less.
Yeah, it's coming at us really fast now.
Man. It's so much faster than they're all of the new tech stuff coming out, just saying like these next iteration of models that are coming out are, the only thing was missing was the human layer interface, right? Like we're building this agentic world that is still using human interfaces. It doesn't make sense. And that will be solved here. And then by the end of the year, and then that just eviscerates everything a human does on a computer.
Well, it's coming really fast. Like these startups, I've been working with an AI team in London, who've helped me build a Ferrari engine for something for agentic matching and matchmaking in a professional context. And then realizing, you need a Honda to drive around in for a while so that investors and other people can understand what it is. But just being exposed to some of the Claude Code potential in the last 2 months, 200,000 lines of code later, in 6 weeks in a couple of products, and it's going, holy cow. And it's like, I saw someone post today, I'm not technical at all either. Like this is, been around technology and I have some knowledge of, the proximity of where different technologies sit, understand the language of APIs and cloud and security and those sorts of things. But I saw someone post today, it was actually 2 days ago, an entrepreneur who I know in Australia, who I don't know personally well, but I know of, posted something that said, I spent, 14 years, $12 million and 500 people to build this platform that we ultimately built and listed on the stock exchange in health tech. I rebuilt that platform in 6 hours. It's and he's now an investor. And it was a really interesting. I'll send the piece because it's super interesting sort of reflection on. And he's quite technical, I feel, and obviously very productive. And I'm sure it was, he was not the full. Building a company over many years is much more than just code.
Yeah, you did a lot more, but the fact that is capable now in less than a day is pretty wild. Right?
Yeah, well, if I'm just getting my head around the fact that I can use multiple instances of Claude Code concurrently on different products from your terminal, rather than just or you could design a team you obviously don't want to code on the same thing at the same time for fear of fucking it up, but like you can design a team that's sort of like an architect, a tester, an engineer, componentry, like modular coding, different versions of Claude. It's like, holy shit. And it's like, if you're not in Visual Studio or in your terminal, you're still dealing with an LLM or a platform that may as well be Wix, right? Like I think most people are probably still in the chat, which can't really help.
Here's the crazy part. If you look at these graphs that are coming out, billions of people aren't even in a chat.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so there's that. And obviously there's some people that never need to be in the chat, right? Like their lives are just going to be the same. They don't use tech. They live off the land. And it's like, maybe that's where this all goes.
They could be the happiest people we know.
All of ourselves to like, we don't need any of this shit. Why did we ever go believe what we were doing before?
Yeah. Well, I really feel like looking at it now, and seeing that it's almost like Web 1 was, bringing things online and automating to a point, but just bringing things online to the detriment of real world interactions in retail and publishing and, newspapers and those things. And that was disruptive. It still takes time. And I think it'll still take more time than people think, right? Like it's not, for large industry and more complex organizations to change their stacks is not a fast thing. And there are human behaviors around all of that, around the inertia of changing something or breaking something that's not broken or changing behaviors.
So here, real quick though, I want to interject on this because I would love your thought because you have the insight, is that I think the difference, and I talk about this often, and I don't know the answer, but my gut tells me the difference this time is large organizations, it takes a long time for them to change. We've never had a technology where 5 people can replace large organizations.
Yeah.
So what do you do with that?
Yeah. Well, you just let the experiment run. I don't think we've got any choice. I think it's happening.
Yeah.
I definitely think there's been some in certain organizations like white collar, like I think big consulting groups like strategy firms. There's been a consistent headcount reduction in those firms, really unusual in a time of crisis and flux economically and macro politics and everything else that's been going on in the world. It's really unusual for those tier one strategy firms to reduce headcount because it's not like people don't need advice in these times. But what I think they're probably amongst the first people in the information economy. Same things happening in audit firms, big four consulting as well. I think in this economy, at the bottom end of those organizations is a lot of research and there's a lot of assimilation of information and basic analysis of and ingestion of content information that you can do. You can automate so much and do it so well at a basic level that
Way better than a human.
Way better than a human. So I think that that's impacting junior research, mid-weight positions. I think there's just been a reduction in that area, and that'll continue. And that worries me. That worries me how, people are going to break into the workforce, but they'll end up in different and probably hopefully more enjoyable roles, because a lot of those roles are where you do your apprenticeship, you do the grunt in the law firm or the accounting firm or the strategy firm or whatever firm you're working in, doing shitty work. It's just like reading things no human should have to go through, contracts or whatever. Yeah, marking up a contract, two people sitting next to each other with a physical contract.
It's going to be a wild world. All right, yeah. So I don't want to miss, so we'll do 2 to 3 and then we'll get to 1. I don't want to do you a disservice on what you're working now because I think it's brilliant. But let's go to the chapter 2. We started getting in there. You're talking about college. You've mentioned the rec tech a couple of times. So I think that's a good place to start. And again, I'm interested in here for the rec tech. What was your big 1 or 2 aha moments going through that wild experience? Because not everybody has a chance to go through what you went through.
Oh, the tech rep, like the boom bust cycle. That was, It was the most fun and the worst experience. It's like, I was only a couple of years into my 9-to-5 career. I'd been traveling in hospitality and doing lifestyle jobs to that point. And then landed in this crazy group of creative people in Sydney office, like just as the Olympics was on. We just it was the most amazing time. And because everything was so new, it was like, companies that are no longer around, some AOL and those sorts of things, but they're all flying, March 1st, Sapient, some exist in different forms. You'd know Sapient being an agency guy from back in the day. So it's sort of, we went through that sort of iteration of web agency, web services, online, all those things, and all the brands that were sort of, marketplace, the beginnings of marketplaces and payments were sort of rumbling around, and we were just learning about this stuff. And it was all happening on the fly. And it was like the phones were ringing off the hook. We'd be turning work away. We didn't necessarily know as much about what we were doing. Like the roles were fairly narrow and basic. It was like designers, developers, heads of web, webmasters, and then heads of digital. And it was like there were different names, codification of roles started to emerge, like content and analytics and those things started to emerge as well. But it was just really exciting. And it was all, because it was new, it was exciting. Some of it was fairly well-formed stuff out of the US or Europe, online travel, online banking, online media, gaming, obviously, transactional stuff. And then it's sort of, that ride up was like industry standard would have a party on the MCA in Darling, like next to the Sydney Opera House and the Harbour Bridge, once a month. And they just started this enormous, crazy party. And that was just what the whole industry was doing. It was just hype and money and energy, and it was never going to end. And we didn't understand anything about the macroeconomics at the time. So it was sort of, then it starts to catch fire a little bit on the other end in the US, and things break down, and all of a sudden the valuations don't stack up. Stuff that we've seen subsequently and may see again quite soon, in terms of too much energy and excitement going to one layer of technology or one group of companies or one group of models, that ultimately, if the market doesn't move quickly enough, there'll have to be a readjustment.
Where was your insight from? What's your big insight from that moment of time reflecting back?
It's probably the hype cycle. So the difference between hype and reality, like the reality is that whatever you imagine, whatever's being sold as that technology can ultimately do will happen. It's inevitable. It's a fait accompli. At the time, though, there were only 300 million people in the world online, maybe 250. The potential of the market, if you executed perfectly, then was only so much. So it's kind of relying on all these things happening. Like bandwidth was massively limiting. The platform interaction was massively limiting. There were proprietary platforms and technologies that didn't speak to each other. There were businesses that wouldn't speak. The industries had to change and adopt common standards for all sorts of things, which took time. And the hype, as soon as the hype gets beyond the industry itself, so it was outside of tech, and you start seeing people just going, yeah, I know nothing about tech, but this is on. I'm going to get all my wealth clients into this bet. And people who really don't seem to know anything about the mechanics, selling the mechanics as an expert to investors. That's
so it was more just the realization that a hype cycle exists, and that is a thing.
It was the first time I'd seen a hype cycle that was then just completely deflated. And you, in retrospect, you look back and go, "Oh shit, yeah, they weren't making any money. They were burning this amount of money." And you still look back on the stories. I see people who say, I built this company and sold it for X, and but we know the backstory. They spent 4 times that amount. Before it basically blew up, and they just made an exit. So an exit of $50 million. You raised 250. Like, what happened to that money for those investors? There's notable. I think Web3 has been through a similar hype cycle with crypto.
Well, it absolutely happened. They never got I always say they never got their iPhone moment. They wanted it, but the hype cycle was around something that really doesn't exist, which is Web3 and blockchain is just an infrastructure layer.
Yeah, correct. And I think that's inevitable. I think that blockchain ecosystem and that technology is so compelling in a decentralized sense that ultimately it will be used at scale for many, many things and make the world a better place and be super exciting for people. But the crypto hype around meme coins and, that gas, that is just setting fire to money. And it's interesting. Like, I think I heard someone talking about Sailor the other day, and he usually drop names in podcasts, but it's like that business was around during the first tech boom and pumped up and lost people a lot of money, managed to recap, but it was, I think, the biggest loss of the tech wreck. Like, it was like billions of dollars. And now it's like, it's frightening. Is this happening again with the same company? Like, who knows?
And these people that feed into the narrative immediately become hated, but also become gods. Like, I will never vividly remember the whole Murad thing of that one speech of a PowerPoint about how meme coins are about culture and this is why they're important. And it's like, dude, you've just put a pretty wrapper on a pile of dog shit yet again. People are just looking to feed their narrative, because at the end of the day, what we talked about too is, the billionaires of the world is like these people think that it's just their overnight ticket to billions in success. And that's not how the world works.
Well, I think big money will follow quickly where they think there's something that can be taken advantage of, right? The market's shifting here. We want to get there and we've got the capital to do it. And the only sad thing is where, in that instance, that's one thing, but when it's pension money or when it's retail money that impacts the rest of the market, that's fucked. Like, because it's like, that pension fund is knee deep in that VC or that private equity firm or that industry, directly or indirectly. And then they take a bath. It's like, that's not good. And I think often they're the ones left holding the parcel, right? I think it feels like the ecosystem's been pretty well developed to, people can take risk and big money can get out before the worst of that correction happens. Because they just have that leverage, and hand off the parcel. And that was the financial crisis, right? Like, 15 years ago, it felt like it was that was just handed off and absorbed into the market as debt, that was passed on to someone else.
Which is not cool, right? And that was like probably the most disheartening thing for me so far in my just experience, what I'm going to call it a career, is when you get to peek behind the curtain of some of these industries and you realize it's just the same a-holes recycling. You would think like
Yeah.
Web3, it was just people being naive about just Ponzi-nomics and liquidating money. But then when you really start putting the dots together, you're like, it's the same Silicon Valley tech bros that have already done this.
Yeah, it's roll up stuff, not trickle down, right? Like, and I think it's the same people who 6 years ago had $50-60 billion seem to have $300 or $400 billion now.
And it's like, do you really
and it
need that?
doesn't feel like it's been that easy to make money for me the last 5 years, 6 years.
Exactly.
Has it been easy? Has it been a good economy? Like, is it going that well? Like, how does that happen? So,
yeah,
like they've built compelling models and they have compelling control and ability to, inject capital and ideas and talent and point a direction and make it happen. But it doesn't seem to be sort of, the system now doesn't seem to be regenerating very well from the other end. So that's probably the worry for me is that, I'm all for, go out there and kick ass and make tons of money and be a great success. But you don't kill the game.
100%. And that's what Web3, which great. This is obviously the obvious backup question is you've been through this and been through Web3 and the .com bust, the rec tech. I like how you call it the rec tech. I've always just heard it as the .com
tech wreck.
Tech wreck. All right.
Yeah.
Tech wreck. You're the first one that's like used that term consistently, but I've just always heard it as the .com bust. What do you think's happening now? What do you see it as bad? Is it different because this technology is moving so fast? Like, what are your thoughts?
In some ways, it feels reminiscent of that same hype cycle we've seen before. I think the technology is more amazing, compelling, and accessible for more people. So I think it's moving faster. So I don't know how big the gap will be between degas and gas or gas and degas and then crossing the chasm. It's really hard, and who will be holding the bag when that happens. But the thing that is concerning because it's sort of a merging of the tech boom bust or the tech boom cycle, hype cycle, and Enron, Anderson, like it's kind of Arthur Anderson, Enron, like the circular issues that happened around supply and control and accounting at that time does feel a little bit circular in no small way. And it's well covered and talked about by people much smarter than me, but those sort of signs are bad for, it only takes one of those dominoes to fall to create an issue. I don't know how far that issue goes. All those companies, many of them are private, which is the other thing that is different from back then is because they're private, they don't suffer the same scrutiny and transparency and obligations for better or worse than the public companies do. So is that a good or bad? Can they avoid being crushed on market because they're private and no one can tell what they're doing? Maybe they can ride out headwinds and issues. Maybe they can't. But I think what will come to pass is if people no longer fund their debt because the numbers are getting so crazy on their valuations.
Yeah. And I always believe the second chances, but like to your point, you got an Arthur Anderson type figure that like fundamentally got convicted of crimes and is now about to IPO, right? So it's like, what do we, what is your advice to people that are naive to what is actually going on and what should they do? Sit and wait in the sidelines, but use AI every day. What should they be doing?
I'm no one to give anyone financial advice. I think,
no, not financial advice. I'm just saying, like in this moment of time, never financial advice.
No,
or like, what do you do with this technology?
Yeah, no, I would dive headfirst into what's making you uncomfortable. So I think there's a big opportunity here, and it's going to be persistent for a little while to go deep, make yourself an expert in how you can solve your own problems or create cool things or do things with these tools that are emerging that have never existed before. Because I felt, we had buddies and people who did amazingly well Web 1 and Web 2, and you think, shit, that was a really good idea. I had some ideas similar to that, or maybe we could have got involved or worked with those guys or built something really cool at that time, because they really did great things, and it felt like you missed the boat. Then I saw, Web 3 come around and going, this feels like another one of those. And we saw people make and lose money. It was really exciting. I think the tech is just slower burn in blockchain, but because it's boring. Like ultimately that tech is boring infrastructure, as you say. It's people are doing sexy things with memes.
The funny thing is blockchain's iPhone moment was the AI coins, meme coins that happened, and this convergence of AI and blockchain because they need each other.
I think blockchain could provide some of the rails and infrastructure to make a lot of this shit safer than it would otherwise be. And
I've always said this, like blockchain is the HTTPS of the agentic future, right?
Hopefully that immutability, the way it will create the possibility of automating safety and controls and transparency, decentralizing risk points from choke points. I think that a risk from choke points. So I think that's super interesting. But I'd say, don't be afraid of it, and don't stop at the freaking chat. Like don't just go on and kick the tires and create some crappy content or a picture or a video. Like I think some of that's being shut down because it's just massive compute for a pointless outcome for just putting more noise into social channels, right? Yeah, you can do that, sure, if that's your gig. You can certainly make documents and you never have to worry about your spelling or doing a version in Spanish or French or Chinese is much easier than it used to be.
Just build something.
Build something. Yeah, if you've got everyone's got a great idea. It's a bit like everyone's got a book in them. I think everyone's got a product in them somewhere because something's pissed them off or something, that they hated about their job or their business or their way of living or working has annoyed them. And it's like, I know so many people got great ideas, but it's always been hard to stitch that into action, into an outcome. Like it was expensive, or you needed technical skills, or you needed to, coalesce a group of people into a goal and then take a punt, and people had to spend time and or money, usually a lot of both, to get anything to the first point. And then Web 2 changed a lot of that. So you could put online business, get a business online really fast and really cheaply. But they were fairly, it's direct to consumer. You still need a product or a service, or you create a marketplace. You still need to build that. But this is like one person can do so much of what used to take a group of people 12 months. One person can do in a week. And I don't think, and it's not a technical person. Like, so I think this is this sort of, the expert generalist has an opportunity here where you understand a lot of how things interrelate and operate in a commercial sense or a mechanical sense. You can do more than a technology, like an engineer in isolation of that knowledge can do. Now, with an engineer, you'll get a better quality of outcome down the track. And I think we're a long way away from being able to build things without great technical people.
Right.
Because,
right.
but those great technical people spend a ton less time on crappy development and engineering, much more time on really exciting architecture and integration.
Yeah, it creates stairs. Man, I knew we were going to be able to talk forever, and we're going to have many more conversations. I want to talk about what you're building now, because we've had, see what we do here. I've got a beautiful insight about who you are as a human being, and you've shared so many different stories and so many nuggets of knowledge. And now I like to just talk about how does that all wrap up into what you're really excited about and what you're building now. What are you building now? Maybe give us a little elevator pitch of what's going on.
Yeah. So obviously I've been fascinated with both tech and people around tech and connecting people for a long time. And something I really wanted to do for my network and the business was maybe there's a way we could create an experience for, our network, our community, which is, giving them access to events and opportunities and investments and connecting them with each other more effectively. In essence. And it was like, can we create a black card experience for our network where they get really cool access to cool shit? And thinking about that, I was sort of like, 2 years ago, LLMs and things started to become more accessible. And I thought, maybe I could create a concierge experience for our community and use LLMs or AI to orchestrate and automate some of the interaction and discovery between people. And then I thought about LinkedIn and what it does well and what it doesn't and what it used to do. Like we were in the first 100,000 people on the platform in 2003. And then we saw subsequent platforms emerge around sort of human networking and social networks. We've worked with most of them at different times. But the thing that happened with social networks is they just became social media and they've been co-opted and monetized in a way that benefits third parties who aren't using the platforms so much as the users themselves. So I just started thinking about that problem, and then I met some awesome people here in Spain and London who've been, had an AI venture studio, and we started playing around with some ideas around agentic matchmaking in a way that's private. So no public directory, no advertising, no sort of exposure of who you are or what you're doing unless you choose to expose that. So we started with communities that exist, like alumni groups and universities, private clubs, industry associations, talking to them about what would be cool to, how do they engage with their communities? Most of them do events and they do content, and it's a very push one-way thing, and they just hope that enough people, like most marketing, engage with them and connect and see value in that community at that time. So we just wanted a way to sort of connect collectively, enable collaboration, discovery between people who are looking for each other. And obviously we have the insight into talent and hiring and talent, but in the same way that Uber changed riders and drivers, the orchestration of that by geography and context and a moment in time, and solving payments and removing all the friction from that, so that people weren't standing on the side of the road, waving at cars driving by trying to get a ride, or drivers driving around trying to find someone to give a ride to. That there's just a better way to orchestrate supply and demand in human networks more broadly. So that's the principle. And if we get that right, my theory is that we can enable collaboration, human collaboration, on an epic scale. We can, on a factor in terms of where it currently is now. Because at the moment, many of the meetings or successes or interactions you have in life are serendipitous. Now, serendipity is great, and happy accidents and sliding doors. We've all had those moments, and I think we all love them. And most of them, it's, if you track back your successes in life, it's been someone was in the right place at the right time at some point in that journey to help you along, or to be a collaborator or a customer or an investor. Maybe you met them at an event. Maybe it was through friends. Maybe it's just randomly at a coffee shop. Maybe you've got a common interest outside of business. Maybe it's at your school where your kids go. Maybe it's, it could be anywhere, but it's accidental sort of interactions. But we spend so much time trying to make, find each other commercially, discover suppliers, find an investor, find talent, find a co-founder, find a partner, find a supplier of some kind. We spend so much energy on that we figure there has to be a better way. So that's where we got to. We've built a platform called eventmedium.ai, which is effectively a live beta where, you can say that you're going to an event, you can establish a canister by talking to the AI, and the AI doesn't expose your information, your motivations, your context to anyone else, unless it finds someone on the network who is the yin to your yang, the other side of your coin, the buyer to your supply, or vice versa. And then if both parties think this is a good match, then the match happens. So that's the outset. And then we've expanded that and realized that you can ingest so much information for curation. So in that case, you can curate people's intents and align them in the right place at the right time. Now we're sort of, we've been able to expand that into another platform that connects with that, to sort of basically orchestrate your contacts, your relationships, the trust that you have in your ecosystem with live signals in the marketplace. So orchestrating what's happening in the market with where your business touches the surface of the market, where you are most trusted. So that's autonodal, but it's a work in progress. But the main philosophy is there's got to be a better way to connect people at the right time without exposing them to advertising and manipulation.
What has been some of your biggest kind of surprise moments going through this? Like, how long has the journey been at this point?
A couple of years, but really accelerated in the last 12 months.
Yeah. And so what have been some insights or maybe like some assumptions that you made that were discredited or things that have proven out that um, you didn't think would be an actual insight that you've cultivated throughout this time?
Yeah, I think we've still got to do the heavy lifting. The hard bit is actually getting to scale, and our go to market. I won't get into too much, but that's part of it. I think what it has changed is that you don't need a ton of money and a massive team
Yeah.
to achieve a lot in the first couple of phases of what you're doing. I think that has to come, and I think what is the doors that have been open in the last 6 months. A lot of what we're doing now wasn't possible 12 months ago. Even if we're looking at the level of matchmaking capability that the logic you can build around, the engine you can build around matchmaking, the amount of information it can ingest, the context it can understand, the evolution of that has been so fast that you just imagine it and you can probably make it happen. You can build it today. It's not, but I think people get a little bit one directional. It's like, but think of, to really create an asset, you do need data. So having something to work with. So for us, having businesses and clients in our own business to actually test assumptions with and say, would this solve a problem for you? Is this meaningfully better? And then realizing that you can, we did an experiment where we ingested, over 2 million PhD paper, the metadata from 2 million PhD papers, ingested that through a semantic search, using Quadrant, then making that semantically searchable in common language. It just took no time and is such a powerful experiment. Yeah. And then you extract the first author and turn that into PhD talent, and then you orchestrate, connect that with businesses as IP on demand, but the system can actually rank: is this how close to commercialization is this theory? Is this research, this IP? Who are the main players in this category of interest? Super interesting. That's just one sort of tangent of it, but it's
so that becomes a vertical within your platform, or how do you think about that?
It's adjacent. We're just looking at that research community as a community and seeing, how do they get exposure to speaking gigs and investment opportunities, like collaboration with investment, collaboration with enterprise and industry for further research. How is that found at the moment? It's probably more mechanical through big brand universities, right? So big brands go to big brand universities. What about all the great IP, deep tech research that's happening in lesser known universities that perhaps don't have the big commercialization engine or ecosystem around them? That was a conversation with a university in the US that it came out of a conversation with them, a really good deep tech university that was saying, we don't have the ecosystem of MIT, Harvard, Stanford, Berkeley, UCLA around us. We don't have that level of not like awareness and capital and generational endowments and everything else, and talent. Everything's drawn to those big brands, big centers, but there's awesome IP and awesome brilliant students and great ideas and tech, thousands of patents that are dormant on an annual basis, like really great, and it just runs out of gas. Where does it go? So part of that, we used to work in university commercialization in Australia, building commercialization teams, and you see the gap between idea, market traction, capital, commercialization is really difficult for a lot of organizations. Those institutions just aren't built that way. And conversely, industry is not really great at discovering the right people at the right time. It's kind of old school, right?
Yeah. I always use this analogy. It's the same as, think of how many Tiger Woods there would be if golf was more accessible, or how many more Wayne Gretzky's we'd have if hockey was. Traveling hockey's thousands of dollars a year. Like, it's not cheap, right? Think about that talent pool but why I love what me and you believe in is, listen, sports are great, but like, how much are they making of a gravital change in the world? You're using that same concept, but now you're unlocking unique thought and creativity and substantial things that could come to drastically change the way we work as humans, which is amazing.
Exactly. Like, to underline that point, which you make well, I was talking to a client the other day in New Zealand, and they're a Sequoia-backed late series, awesome business, global business in content, marketplace, basically orchestrating, production services and editing and all those things all over the world. So instead of flying a production team to remote locations, you find a lot of local stuff on the marketplace and virtual editing, and it's really cool. Obviously, really cool idea, and great people and awesome entrepreneurs. Done really well, but obviously AI is impacting that. So they're building, how does AI impact them? Because all of a sudden you can AI the content. You don't have, let alone physically produce it. Huge impact. So they've now, but people were expert in that. So they're now marketplacing that. So they've got the front end. So they're moving with the times. But the really cool insight for me talking to them was none of their engineers are allowed to code anymore. So none of them actually do hands-on coding anymore. They all use Claude encoding tools. And now the most productive, they're able to rebuild their entire platform. I think the last rebuild took something like 18 months, 2 years. And the last rebuild took less than 3 months. And, enterprise grade, amazing, more capability. And their most productive coder, engineer, is their head of design. So it's almost like, so the interesting insight there for me is, if you've got a great imagination, put it to work. Like, just play with these things and see what happens. Because I think a lot of people are really creative, think, engineering, maths, nightmare. But it's literally, no, seriously, just talk to the machine and tell it what you need, and then play with it and keep doing it and see what happens. You'll be surprised. You'll be surprised.
Yeah. And it's my buddy who has the AI agency in LA says the same thing. I said, how is this all impacting what he sees now? And he goes, the world is merging to creatives. And if you don't understand that concept, you're going to be in trouble. And he was like, my project managers at my company, I expect them to be able to storyboard an idea, because the tools allow you to do that. Because but it boils down to do you have an idea or not? But even back to your earlier point, which excites me more about what you said, is like, that's super cool concept. But you prefaced the entrepreneur, for rightfully so, for credibility, of saying Sequoia backed. And it's like, we can get to a future because of your platform I don't care anymore about who's backing who. I care about the good idea.
Well, I think this technology in concert with blockchain. So ultimately we see our platforms also being decentralized. So I don't want to be beholden to, or customers being beholden to, big centralized control points that end up rinsing you out. And the thing is, I think the impact is going to be that you can bring the cost of platform down so much from what it's being, how it's positioned out, because you'll have so much more control. I was talking to someone the other day who's deeply technical onto his third venture, funded venture. He's had a good exit when he was in his 20s, and he got blown up in the crypto wars. Not his own fault, but it was a hard story. But he's now back onto neobanking and FX in Southeast Asia with using stablecoin. It's super exciting. But he'd built something for his wife, who's a veterinarian, and he'd built some practice management software, because in that industry there's existing practice management tools and things that have been around for a while, and some are well established and some are a bit fresher than others, but most of them are pretty tired, and a lot of industries are like that. You got tired tech, and he rebuilt like something that was to purpose, 10 times better than existed before, just for her practice, the way they work and their customers and their ecosystem and their interoperative systems. And he was just saying, should we go on-prem? Like, is there a thing here to go on-prem now? Like, do we need to be in the cloud, paying a ticket over there? Do we create our own? Which I find really interesting. It's like, and this is part of decentralized. Like, if you look at, ICP or Solana, like, there are these ecosystems of hardware and community operated infrastructure where you can maybe lower the cost and lower the risk of being controlled by one central point, and offer redundancy to your network. But the idea of someone building their own piece of software for a practice and having a Mac in the office and a Mac at home, and maybe some backup is pretty interesting.
Yeah.
Especially for non-critical things, right? So it's like, so much we just keep paying layers and layers and layers of money to, we pay tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars to different software providers on a per seat basis. And back in the days, it made sense economically. We pay $100 a seat for 5 people. That's better than paying 20, 30 grand to build a piece of software and then maintenance and everything else. Now, you sort of think about how much you're spending across a mid-sized organization, layer upon layer of system, and you could probably replace nearly all of it.
Yeah, it's going to be very interesting, the Salesforce and the HubSpots of the world, how this all unfolds in the next 5 years, because you come back to this hyper micro, because I could build this up, we're a year away from like me talking to my computer and building a pretty robust system exact to my specs.
Like exact
to my spec. Well, I mean, yeah, you can do that now, but but less engineering is what I'm getting at, right? So all of the engineering will be even more, and it'll be like really working for you, like right out of the box, basically. And as these, that's why open source is so important, because we cannot get to the world where there's one frontier model, because they could just pull the plug, and then what do you do?
Right? Yeah, and look, as I said, it always takes longer than you think. I think faster than the last time, but longer than you think, because there's so many. To be a system of record for finance or data is a big deal for a big company, and it all gets connected.
Is the note, right?
Yeah, and it's all integrated. I think what this unlocks is so much potential for SMEs and individuals to take control of things that have less enterprise risk and governance and other things attached to them. That's not existential, like to your shareholders. And I think that's the difference. And I think as soon as, and it's just going to be interesting to see how quickly adoption and discovery and awareness sparks at that level. Because I think, in Web 1 and 2, probably the main drivers are enterprise. In Web 1, adoption of digital channels and getting things online at scale. Obviously fantastic entrepreneurs and independents as well, but of course that got consolidated. But it becomes awareness when you get enough product and experience into enough people's hands. Like, I think I always thought that it was so dry and slow, like the adoption of just basic online technology and connected technologies, until the point where I think board members got iPhones because they wanted to interact with their grandchildren on social media, which is sometime, between 2008, 2013. And that's when all this sort of, the awareness. Have you seen this app? You seen this app, man? See what you can do? It's like, they was looking at kids, the photos of their grandkids, and then discover Shazam, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, or Google Maps. But it's like, it's super cool. But I think how quickly it catches fire, is going to be interesting. But I think the ability for that to be a democratic impact on the world, in an access to do shit, it's up to you. And that's my advice, is just grab it. Just find out. Don't worry about being uncomfortable. It's not, you're just talking. You can chat. You can actually just chat. Use your voice to chat to the machine, whichever LLM you choose. Ask it how to do something, and then ask it how to do the next thing. If you don't know how to do that, tell it to explain it. And then ask it to tell you what systems to use, and tell it you know nothing about tech. Ask it to just craft your experience, but go beyond just building a meme image and automating some content.
Beautiful, man. I always have one question for every guest at the end. I promise it's a softball. Don't start shivering. But before we get there, next 3 to 6 months, for you and your company, what does that look like to you?
Yeah, well, for Mitchell Lake, the search firm, we're implementing a lot of these technologies with our own data and experimenting in our own sandbox. And that's super exciting, because it's kind of a good test case for the platform ecosystem that we're building, with Autonodal and event medium or the medium ecosystem. So it's really going beyond experiments, beyond those sort of pilots, and letting them loose. It's exciting being able to enable some communities, private clubs, alumni, industry associations and events, owners, giving them that capability, but also their members. So we're not charging for anything. We just want people to play with these things and see if they're useful. But what we're going to do in the next 3 to 6 months is see how much of this is useful and how much of our theory is proven out. And that's exciting because it's like writing a book and see if anyone reads it.
100%.
Yeah, it's
super exciting.
Or a song. Yeah, but it's fun. So we're getting towards the fun bit. We've done a lot of hard yards on building and integrating and testing. And hopefully this is just one example. And we've got people who want to buy and invest now, so that's cool. But it's how big can it get and how useful can it be? That's what we're excited about.
Yeah. Beautiful, man. And so my last question that I ask every guest, and I'm deeply interested in what you think is, now that you've been through the Mikey G podcast experience, if someone asked you what it was like, what would you say?
It was a great conversation.
Oh, beautiful. Yeah. That's exactly what I'm going for, man. I'm just going for a simple, meaningful conversation that you'll think about, and hopefully it made you think a little bit differently too, just the way I asked some questions about your experience. And I look back and reflect on the things that we talked about. I really, really, there was a couple things. The gap year and just the impact of how that had you. And then we had this back and forth of, and this is why I love these conversations so much, is because we live in this day and age where everyone thinks there's a right and a wrong. And then we had this tug of back and forth of like, gap years are amazing, but then when you run out of money, you go back to your family. And family's amazing, but I haven't been next to them my whole life. And it's like you're constantly tugging back and forth, and people think that there's some easy solution, and there's just not.
Yeah, look, but I think there's so much commonality to human experience, right? Like we all have so much in common in terms of struggles and joys and experiences and otherwise. And, the more you share that with people, the more you understand that you're alike, which I think is healthy. But I'd much rather listen to a story than, I think when you're online or you're doing things now, creating content, it's all about pitching or just selling or communicating one narrative. And I think the way you frame a conversation and take people backwards and forwards and start with the beginning and figure out people's origin stories. I think it's nice because you get to share stories or share stories in a way that's not just pitching information.
Correct. And that's the whole beauty of it. And I think actually that was my second point is, more than most podcasts, you had so many beautiful thoughts. It just was hard to stay on that chronological order because you've done so many interesting things. But it was always grounded in connection and how do you cultivate a personal relationship. And I think you gave some really cool, interesting, tangible things. I mean, just even the conversation of finding your local bar. Right? Like, what do you do?
Find the best bar in town. Yeah. There's a technique. There's a useful tool. Not for everyone. And remember to leave the bar at some point.
Leave the bar and don't end arm wrestling when you can wake up in the hospital.
No, you'll end up in trouble. Yeah.
But the things like those were the things that I was, now you probably don't even, you're like, oh, I talked about a bar. But for me, those are all super impactful things. And I think you had so many little tidbits throughout this entire conversation that you just thought were normal, regular things. And I think that's the power of what we just did, is there'll be people that'll listen to this and take some random nugget that just means you don't even really think about. It's going to be profound impact for people. And you took them through this journey and you have so much wealth of knowledge. Dude, we talked for almost 2 hours and I feel like we barely scratched the surface. So it's not lost on me.
I always appreciate the chance to talk. But about myself, it's, I love, for a living, I've listened and helped retell other people's stories, venture stories, founder stories, the stories of the talent and leaders and experts that we connect them with. And it's, you fall in love with the idea of stories, and listening to really great journey stories from other people is a lot of fun. And I everyone has something to offer and share a perspective that's useful. Like, no one has the same life. No one has the same perspective. But everyone has the same world to work within, more or less, coming at different angles and different places, different times. But it's, there's always something you can pick up a nugget from someone. I've been lucky to meet so many fantastic, motivated people over the course of what we do and what I'm doing now, that it's, it's just a super experience. And it's great to meet, through that, meeting you and some of your ecosystem has been fantastic as well. So I appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. And to wrap it all up, that's it. I think the main, and I was on this beautiful guy, Brian McDonald. He's got a really cool book about the art of storytelling and how important stories is. And that's one of the biggest things that came out of this as well too, is I think one of the reasons humans are the way they are, one of the main reasons is we the advent of a story. And we got really good at telling stories. And you did that today, and I appreciate that. And it's not lost on me that you spent that amount of time, because you're a busy person. We all are. And I'm deeply, deeply grateful for the time, man. This is just the beginning of a friendship, like I said.
Man, it was my pleasure. Absolutely. And, I feel honored to have been invited on. So thank you for giving me the opportunity.
For sure. And with that being said, people, the Mikey G podcast experience is coming to a close. JT and Mikey, we love you all. We will be back in a week from now with a beautiful human being she's building AI agent, the next phase of AI agents that have personality for enterprises, sold a startup in psychology and education, worked at deans of schools. It's a really interesting concept. And she's just beautiful human like JT. So we're going to have a really good time. Thank you all. We love you. Mike G and JT are out.